Hey, and we're live. Welcome to episode 214. This episode is called All in the Framing. So many of us know in our hearts that we have stories we want to share to help others. I think I knew this from the time I was a little kid. But then we have obstacles that frequently come between us and telling those stories. One of my major obstacles was I became very ashamed of my voice and also very shy. Not among friends, but publicly. The last thing I wanted to do as a teenager and a high school kid and a college kid was speak in front of an audience to reveal anything about my life in front of the audience. And then there was a certain point where I realized that I didn't want to live that way. That I wanted to speak on stage, that I wanted to express myself. And then at that point, I kind of went to the other extreme of I became an oversharing Jason. So anyway, what I want to say right here is on a path to telling our own stories in a way to help others. Yes, it's our own story, but it's going to take other people to help us. Other people with different perspectives that can help us organize, that can help us sort things out, that can help us take creative leaps. And I've had many heroes on this journey help me, but one of the biggest, if not the biggest heroes on this journey has been Chris Taylor. He came to me at a point where I was kind of like, oh, I'm speaking, oh, I can say anything, oh my gosh. And he's like, Jason, okay, we see your potential, and let's hone it and let's focus it, and let's really create it into something that can do some good in the world. So with that, before I spill all the beans, I'll bring Chris on in a second. But first, this.
Today's guest, Jason Freeman and Chris Taylor.
I should have done that intro live. Today's guest. Thank you.
Oh, so you're the voice behind the intro.
I'm the voice behind the intro.
So,
annoying voice.
So, Chris Taylor, welcome to the podcast. That you create all the behind the scenes, the graphics are yours, the voice is yours. The idea during the pandemic, hey Jason, we should start a podcast, is yours. So welcome to your own podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being the powerhouse that brings all this amazing content that is so easy for me to kind of work with and be able to hone and direct and figure out. So thank you for having me on your podcast. Today we can treat it like ours, I guess.
Yeah, it's us. So, Chris, I think was it in 2013? Yeah, in April 2013, I before we knew each other, I posted this on Facebook, and I quote my own words. I did it. I just finished revising my new book, and it's entitled Bedbugs, Virginity, and Money Issues. Yay! And sent it off to my business partner for the next round of edits. Yes.
All right. Well, here's the rest of that episode description. That I don't know. There's a part of me that still wishes I would have been able to read Bedbugs, Virginity, and Money Issues, but we'll circle back to that. So for this episode, the story we tell about our lives and our adeptness at conveying it can greatly impact the quality of our lives and the lives around us. Nowadays, I'm speaking in your voice here. Nowadays, I don't care to mention this book title publicly. With publishing that book and being known as the guy who had built his business around airing his dirty laundry have been a winning business strategy. I have no idea because the book went by the wayside, but I imagine it would have created a fairly miserable reality for me. It's true that authenticity is a key component of a successful brand, but one can be authentic without the full exposé of their life on display. The term professional authenticity comes to mind. There's a balance between being professional who is uncomfortably secretive and being a professional whose business is a glorified tell-all book. Fresh off the heels of celebrating our short film From Awkward to Awesome becoming an official selection of the film festival by Rare by Design, I will join me, Chris Taylor. I will join you, Jason Freeman, as we explore the balance between the professional authenticity and privacy we are continually doing our imperfect best to strike at Jason W. Freeman, LLC.
That's awesome. You read that. So that the balance between we found the balance between professional authenticity and knowing what to keep private. We found it. I mean, now after almost 10 years working together, we kind of have a sense of what we want to put out in public and what we definitely do not. But back when we started working together, I just didn't have that sense. So what was the experience like with you working with a client you were just getting to know who didn't really have a sense of what to share and what not to share?
Well, I think let's bring it back there to the beginning. Part of my job has always been to, as a brand developer or as a graphic designer, has been to get to know my clients as much as I can, and most clients are relatively closed off. It's about getting them to communicate what they're trying to convey, doing research, doing all this and that. With you, I had a different endpoint. I knew you personally before I approached you and said, I think we could really do something together. I met you at a few like private functions that we were at. I remember a painting class, and I think during that, like I was starting to get a sense of who you were, but I think you were still a little shy. I didn't fully get to know you, until I went to another event where you spoke on stage, and I had met you enough off stage at that point to have a sense that, this guy's nice. I like this guy. I don't really know much about him. And then the presentation you gave on stage proceeded to just blow me away. And, it really, I've said it before, but it really kind of hit me in my core and made me reevaluate things that I was going through at that time in my life. And it was just like, I knew at that point, I was like, oh man, this guy's going to be something. His message deserves to be heard. If it hit me like that, what can we do? And then, we kind of went on with our own separate ways, our own separate lives. And then I came, I don't remember what it was. I don't think I was living in Encinitas at the time, but when I moved to Encinitas, I remember I was kind of reviewing. We were closer because I was in North County, San Diego, you were in South County. And I remember reviewing the website that you had then and just being kind of, not to knock anybody else's work. Everyone does what they do. But I just remember seeing it and being like, wow, this doesn't give me any impression of who that guy is I saw on stage. This doesn't give me any impression of the little glimpses of humor that I saw from you, And so it started to become, what can we do together to start bringing out the side of you that I've witnessed with my own eyes, but is not being conveyed anywhere in your online presence.
I'm glad you reminded me of that period, because I really did have two things going on. Part of me wanted to tell all, hence that book title, but another part of me thought I needed to be very, very serious and professional on something like a website. So it was this weird kind of oversharing on one hand, but being overly serious on the other. And I'm sure people who viewed the website were like, this doesn't quite make sense. And they say a confused mind doesn't buy, and I would say more than that, a confused mind just doesn't know what to do next. And there's so many other things to click on and do. It's easy if one's not presenting a coherent and accessible message. It's easy just to move on. And
yeah, I mean, and that's totally relatable and understandable, because each one of us, we have so many complexities, and there's so many interests and so many things that we're into. And especially when you're looking at being the face of your brand, like Jason Freeman, Awkwardly Awesome, and Perfect Best, this is all you. You are the face of it. And so, yeah, it's like, well, I want to bring my personality into this. I want to bring my interest into this. I want to bring my humor into it. But it's also a question of, how do I do this without overwhelming everybody? And I think probably part of the oversharing was coming from, the overwhelming aspect of it. It was like you had all these different things which were exciting for you, but how do you filter that? How do you find the proper outlets for it? To be honest with you, had you released that book, Bed Bugs, Virginity, and Money Issues, you would have found a niche audience. You would have probably found, maybe even some huge viral success from it. But like you said, it may have pigeonholed yourself. I know you had mentioned, basically the advance or the rough draft of the book kind of horrified people you knew, and it just, you talked about a miserable reality of what that could have done could you expand on that slightly? Are you comfortable expanding on that?
Yeah. So I view it as we each have a lot of energy to do any number of things, like if you have a full tank of gas, you can drive any direction from where you are, and you're free to do that. The question becomes is how do you want to use that tank of gas? Where do you want to go? Yes, but my book Bed Bugs, Virginity and Money Issue. I mean, I think it might have been such an outlandish tale, and it might have been immensely successful even. It might have gotten me interviews. It might have, I mean, who knows? Might have. But was that the direction I wanted to go with my career? Because the other big thing about sharing personal stories and being professionally authentic is the story comes to the story is useful if it's useful to the people listening.
Yeah.
So I'm all about, on one hand, journaling, therapeutic writing. If someone doesn't want to write, like recording into your phone or another device, and just that's such a rich. That can be such a rich exploration and help us get to deeper levels of ourselves and help us feel more control and more understanding of what our lives really are. And that type of thing is all about us and healing our lives and expanding our understanding of ourselves. But when we endeavor to put a story out to help other people, it's not only about us, it's about our story in service of other people's stories. Like, for example, I'm thinking of cancer because I have a friend, Tim Sohn, who has a amazing podcast about cancer and has helped so many people. But when he tells his story, it's not just about hearing his story and empathizing with his story. When he tells it in service of others, they can start relating their own cancer story and start thinking of more aspects of their own story because he's courageously sharing his story. So in a way, sharing our stories to help others is not a tell at all, but a very, very intentional thing.
Yes.
It's hard to explain.
No, it is. I mean, it is hard to explain. It's even harder to capture. But you said something interesting there that I do want to circle back to, and then I'll jump back to this one. But you mentioned that you journal every day. You journal. Do do you find that obviously we all have stuff in us? Do you find that it helps to kind of use the journaling for just the tell-all or whatever comes up, the stuff that you never would worry about sharing publicly? Do you find nuggets of wisdom in there? Do you find things in there that you're like, oh, this would be in service to others, or this would be something that others could relate to, but you kind of have to air the dirty water, the dirty laundry in the process? Or is it something totally different? I know it's something you do that's immensely helpful. I was just kind of curious.
So that's an exceedingly awesome question. Yes, so much of the material that we share originally comes from my journal entries because I found that when I just don't encumber myself as a writer by thinking about what will play right to an audience, what they need to hear and stuff like that, but just say what I'm going to say. Then I can go back if there's a nugget in that or a section in that and pull that out and we work together. We call it ping ponging. I send it to you to edit, you send it back. And we can work together to make it say what we want to communicate. To make it build the bridge between personal experience and the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing that, with part of what I do, I do have kind of that audience experience metric, that audience understanding of sometimes of, okay, because sometimes when we start the ping pong process, we call it ping ponging because you literally ping a draft to me, I pong it back to you, or pong back questions or whatever else comes with our process there. But the whole idea is honing and developing something. And so sometimes the stuff that comes my way, it might be like, okay, but how is this, how does this relate to me? How does this relate to the audience, And so it's kind of about finding that, because the key difference between that book title that you wrote and the person I saw speaking on stage was that they were two different people. The person on stage spoke to me directly, and I saw that power, and that's who I wanted to bring out. But then, you have these other aspects that could be fun, it could be great on their own and everything else, but you don't want to leave. Your potential is so much in your ability to get people to relate to you, to get people to look at themselves and relate what you're saying in your journey, your experience, to their own story. So it's very much about finding ways to connect with people in that way, that they open up in turn, that they explore themselves, and that makes them closer to you. And to me, that's far more authentic in that way. And I think that's always kind of what we're honing to do.
I've never thought about it in this way until this conversation. This is so great. But like I had to describe kind of would have pushed away, maybe pushed away some of the bridge I was hoping to build with the reader, which would have drawn them into the story because they could see themselves in the story. I mean, I was hoping by reading the tarot they would create that bridge on their own and relate it on their own, but it is not an automatic thing we found for the audience or the reader to create that bridge on their own. It's something that
Right.
the writer can very intentionally do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and I think part of that is because think of your average person that comes across our stuff. It's normally on scrolling social media, so there is also that aspect of just being entertained and everything else. So that's why also when we're doing this, I don't want to give the impression that you have this massive story and all these complex parts of you, and you only choose to focus on this, because that's definitely not what's happening here either. We're choosing as much of like these complexities to explore in the appropriate channels as we were, and as much as we are, okay, maybe leave that to the side, or maybe that's for another day, right? And I think that's kind of why social media has been such a cool thing for us, because there's different channels for these outlets, right? You have a lot to you, and not only do you have a lot of humor, and that was something we worked to bring out and convey in some of the videos, but you also don't want to come across as a comedian, because you're also not up on stage doing stand-up. There's a lot of humor in your stuff, but there's also a lot of important stuff. And so we didn't want to write the copy on the website to be too jokey, and that would turn people off, right? We didn't want to only put out goofy videos, because then that would turn people off. You also have a master's in poetry. You have a ton of experience in this area of your life. You write some beautiful poetry, but you were hiding most of it, just like your voice, in a green tub. So we're exploring, okay, well, how do we bring some of this out in what you're doing in a way that connects? And we started coming up with what creating memes, little nuggets, little poems, little things that we give, the audience, that for those who choose to engage with that, they can engage, but it's not necessarily the main thing. It's kind of an optional thing that if people want to engage with this piece of content, they can, and if they don't want to, we have plenty of other options for them. Same with your photography. You go on these walks and you see things from such a unique perspective. And I got interested in, okay, well, what's your reasoning for taking this picture, for instance? Like what spoke to you here? And then you start to kind of explain to me your reasoning. I was like, well, this stuff goes hand in glove with what we're doing. So again, we created that as another form of content that people can relate with. And if you think about all of it, it connects to the whole. It all helps to elaborate upon who you are. It's all these different avenues of interest, but it's done so in a way where if you go to the website, you're not just going to be bombarded with poetry. You're not just going to be bombarded with pictures. You're going to very much see who Jason Freeman is, what the essence of the brand is, and everything else. And then all these other things are these little ways to enrich the experience, to get to know you more personally. And I think I went on a little rambling tear.
I'm so glad you brought it up. It's as when presenting a story, it's hard to. I mean, there's so many aspects of each of us. We're all complex beings, as you've said. And you gave the example of the photos, poetry, different material we put out and balancing all that. But there's also balance in subject matter too. Like we could talk exclusively about mm, and build a bridge with the audience talking about the disabled experience, which we couldn't. I mean, there's a huge number of people in the world who experience a disability at some point in their life. We would have had plenty of an audience if everything was about the disabled experience, but but that's just one aspect of who I am and one aspect of what we want to convey. We also have so much about awkwardly awesome and imperfect best, but again, we'll not focus exclusively on the concept of imperfect best. It's one part of the whole.
Right.
Which doesn't necessarily make it easier thinking of how to build a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean that's really it. It's kind of its own ecosystem or its own universe, if you will, depending, how nerdy you are and how much you want to get out there into the universe and the metaverse and this sort of stuff. I'm talking about like if you watch the comic book stuff and those movies, everything now they're building in film is the universe. So you've got kind of that main core thing, and everything else evolves around it and builds
like the Marvel universe, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I wasn't meaning to knock the more spiritual side of the spiritual universe or things like that. I was talking very specifically in that sense. But reeling it back in, if you look at the website's kind of like the hub, and social media is kind of like the satellites we put in orbit and everything, right? And it's the different parts of you, the different parts of your personality. If all we used social media for was to beat people over the head with the same, same core idea of, say, the perfect best, like we could do it 1,000 different ways, and we have. But if that's all they see, I think they're going to get, okay, I've seen enough of this. I don't know, because we want people to always engage and pay attention and find ways in which what you're saying, what you're doing can help them in some way or help enrich them in some way. Because so much of what you say is very profound. So much of your journey and your story does relate with people on such a deep level. And that's also, if you think about kind of where the podcast came into the thinking too. The podcast was an idea I'd been throwing out there for a while, and you didn't seem to have much interest in it, because it was, I think you're thinking
I was avoiding it. Don't tell Chris so.
Yeah. So you're avoiding it, and it made sense because at that time it was like, okay, well, I'm having success in this area. We're booking a lot of speaking opportunities. This area of my business is growing. This is where I want to focus on. I don't really see how having a podcast can help me in this direction. And then we were kind of gifted, COVID and the pandemic, as you said, to be like, oh crap, that just put a stop. I put a halt to everything here. So now we've got to lean into some of this other stuff. And it kind of, made us revisit, these other ideas and these other things. And okay, these things weren't applicable then, but how do they apply now? And then just look at what you've done with this podcast. I mean, the fact that you've had other people on to tell their stories or tell aspects of their stories, that you've shown so much that how just the average person that we pass every day on the street has so much to them that's worth sharing, and it's worth sharing on a public stage. And I would say probably 60 to 70% of your guests, this might be the first podcast they've ever done or they've ever been on. And they're not used to sharing this. This is just something they keep open, but there's something about you that helps them bring out, these just immensely helpful stories. And thinking about it too, we're talking
They
about
have
what we're
so
sharing.
much wisdom, don't they?
Yeah, the wisdom there. It's like we do pod clips from these from time to time where we whittle down an hour-long episode into, a minute to a 2-minute, nugget of wisdom that's in there often. And there's not a single podcast episode of how many have we done now? 100 and, which was this? No, 214 that we've done. There's not a single episode that doesn't have at least one of those podcasts in there. You can listen to any one in the list and you're going to move away with something. And that's because everybody has something to share. And you lead it so brilliantly, And that was where my idea came from initially. Why I was pushing for this so much is because anybody that knows you as a friend knows what a great listener you are, knows that you actually hear what someone's saying and you can shine it back on them in a way that they can't necessarily do by themselves. You have a way of getting people to open up. You have a way of listening. And then you also have like this non-judgmental way to question and challenge people and get people to think of what they're saying in a very real and authentic light. And it was like, you're just an excellent, listener and interviewer. And you have just these profound questions and these profound answers as well, these solutions to things. So it's like, that really feels like it goes hand in glove. And so I'm so glad that we went down this route, because 214 episodes in, you're still proving week in and week out how right this is for the brand. It's an expansion on it.
First, I want to thank you. Then I want to change the subject. As I said at the beginning of the show, it takes a team, and so interviewing people on this podcast has been one of the absolute delights of my career. I love it so much. I look forward to it, and I might have missed out on it if I didn't have you. And when I thought of a podcast before I did it, I had the story that, I can't do it. I don't know the technology or whatever. And if I didn't have you saying, yes, you can, Jason. Yes, I can help you, I might have missed out on this whole part of my life that I love so much, and miss out on offering it to so many people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. It still takes you having the bravery to put yourself on camera and do it. I can tell you from doing it a couple times a year with you, it's not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, it does take something. And it's amazing that we get a lot of first time guests who are willing to, first time to a podcast, guests who are willing to prepare and show up and do it. It's pretty amazing. And I do want to change the subject here, because back in the fall of 2019, I think we endeavored to make a video about kind of my journey and build a bridge between my life and the viewer's life. What was the
Yes.
process like?
Sorry, you froze on me for a second there. You there?
Yeah.
Okay. I missed the last part.
What was the process like of making from awkward to awesome?
All right. So if you remember, one of the first things we worked on together was our reel, right? It was getting together our video reel. We knew that video was going to be a great way forward. This was before TikTok was happening. This was before a lot of this stuff. But we knew with YouTube, with everything else, one of the best ways to get you and your message out there was going to be to make videos. And one of the things that we thought to do, and this it took a lot leading up into it, was you have this amazing story, and so much of that story is like, well, so much of that story is told on stage and people experience on stage, but how do we bring that story to people who don't necessarily get to see you live? Because a lot of times when you speak live, it's not public events. It's not open to the public. It's you're lucky enough to be there, or you're lucky enough to be in the audience. So how do we bring that essence, that power of that part of your story, and how do we put it in front of the public's eyes? And so that kind of got us going down this route of from awkward to awesome, which was essentially telling the story that you do on stage in as condensed a version as possible. But not being so condensed that it's like a highlight reel, And so you and I got together many times, and we would initially we wrote out scripts and things like that, and we kind of honed it into, okay, here's the parts, here's what makes sense. I remember sitting in my apartment in Lake Forest with you, and you had brought a lot of childhood photos of yourself, and I was asking you, oh, tell me about this, or tell me about this kid, and somewhere in there, and maybe one day we'll find it, we actually have just iPhone footage of you reminiscing about these photos, and I got such a greater glimpse into your childhood and your journey and all these things, and so that informed it too. It wasn't just like, let's only do this. It was, how much can we bring in to this? And if you want to speak to any of this as I'm talking about it, feel free to interject. But I just remember that so much of the production of this video started, or so much of the pre-production of the video started just by us being together, hanging out, getting to know more about each other, because we're focused on this direction, because we're focused on this part of the journey. And then we eventually get to the point where the cameras are now there, they're set up, the lights are on, the backdrop's there. We're set up in my garage.
and that point was what started being very challenging for me, because for whatever reason, it's easier to talk to a friend about our lives than to have a camera in front of you, a green screen behind you. At least for me, I became nervous, and often when I become nervous in those type of situations, I used to start to ramble a lot. And in an 8-minute video, it can be a lot of rambling.
Right. It is not an easy process, and I commend you for having the courage to sit in front of that video, in front of that camera, and have everything on you. It's not a comfortable experience, and you're looking at something very mechanical, it's not easy to act and pretend like that's the audience that you're speaking to when you're used to actually speaking to an audience from the stage. So I think as we got down there into it, it helped that we had so much warm up, because I kind of could make adjustments on the spot, right? So here we go, we're hitting record, and now it's coming across more stilted. It's coming across more like we're reading from a script as opposed to this other side of exploring. So we kind of did this thing where it's like, okay, well, let's just shoot it through a few times as if we're doing the script, and let's just break that script up. And so we kind of got that part of it out of the way. And then it started to become more of what it was in the kitchen. And we just shot a ton of footage. Fortunately, we're in the day and age where we can do that, where I would ask you questions about, oh, can you describe this era or this time of your life? And then you would just kind of be talking to me. And all of a sudden it became us having a conversation, and the camera wasn't there. And then if you remember right too, we had this camera rental for a certain amount of time. So I'm like, okay, well, hey, there's another avenue of content we can create here, which is just you do so well and you have so many profound things when you're just in the state of flow. So I'm like, okay, well, hey, the more we can keep them in flow, the better this video is going to be, right? The better this short film on his life is going to be. So we would take breaks, and our breaks weren't like going out and getting food, even though we did that too. But our breaks were like, okay, let's do these things on the fly. I'm going to ask you a question and see how you answer it. I'm just filming you do it. And that became this whole offshoot series we did called Awkwardly Awesome Answers. So anybody who's watching our short film and like, oh, why is there the same background with Awkwardly Awesome Answers and, from awkward to awesome? Well, that's why, because it was just, these are kind of the in-between takes, and those awkwardly awesome answers we did, by the way, were never like really edited. It's pretty much just whatever came out in that moment in flow, and I loved that. But it kept you at that point where you were able to just give me so much to work with. And then the hard part became, shit, what do I do with all this? How do I whittle this massive amount of content down into something that tells the story? And it's better to have too much than too little, but there was a lot.
You are a very patient and gifted coach and director. It was amazing. You created something amazing with this video. So we made this video in 2019, and then put a lot of energy in it, and then the pandemic happened and started focusing on the podcast, and then re-emerging as a speaker from the pandemic. And then I just had the opportunity to submit this film to a film festival and just this year, and it got accepted.
Yeah, I mean, that was when you sent me that email, I'm like, really? That's freaking awesome. And it gave us a chance to kind of go back and put a fresh edit on it, do some things, because some things have changed since 2019 as well, right? Like initially it opened up with, I live in sunny San Diego.
Oh yeah.
But I'm originally from Sioux Falls. I was like, okay, well, we need to change that to be accurate, to evolve with where you are now, and not have to explain everything.
So speaking of explaining everything, we could talk about the behind the scenes of this video all day, but maybe we should show it.
Yeah, let's watch it. Let's watch it together here. Okay, I guess I gotta add it to the stage here.
Hi, I'm Jason Freeman. I'm originally from South Dakota. If you listen closely, you might be able to pick that up in my unique accent. I have a question for you. What's something in your life that you really want to do, but you're just not doing? 12 years ago, I had so many things I had thought of to do in my life, but you know what? I was talking myself out of almost all of them. And I had great excuses. I think we all do. One of mine was my disability. My life almost didn't start. When I was born, my umbilical cord became kinked like a garden hose, which makes it super difficult for me to say the word umbilical. The name of my condition is cerebral palsy. Fortunately, as a little kid, I had no idea of the gravity of what had happened. I was just happy being me and figured I could do anything I wanted to in my life. But in fourth grade, something switched, and I began comparing myself to the other kids. Ugh, that so didn't go well. But I still have my best friend, John. John and I had an unusual friendship. Like we did crazy things and went with just like very unique thoughts about what we should do. Like one day we just told his parents we were walking around the neighborhood and as we got farther and farther away from his house, I'm like, hey John, let's walk out to my house. And John's like, what? Your house is way out in the country. But I'm like, it'll be fun. We can do it. And we walk through town and along highways. Imagine my parents' shock when we show up out there. It was a 6-mile walk. And what I didn't mention is John had asthma. And he promptly threw up on my parents' new carpet to celebrate. But John was a trooper. He just did whatever he put his mind to. He loved being alive. Then the next year, he was out biking and got hit by a car and died. Chris, could you pause it? I was devastated. What was I? This is really an example of vulnerability here. Like I had never talked about John's death publicly much before this video, but it's vulnerability with a purpose. So many people go through loss and like either someone dies or they get estranged from someone. So it's a story about loss, which I hope connects with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I remember that whole part we just watched about, talking about how you and John went for was it 5-mile walk or 7-mile?
Yeah. It was a long walk.
And him him having asthma and proceeding to throw up on your parents' fresh carpet, like that gave so much insight into who John was, your relationship with him, what a trooper he was. So that allowed the audience to connect on that deeper level, so that then when he did share this very vulnerable portion of the story, it hit that much harder, for the audience, because it's obvious that it affected you, but it was also, how do we bring the audience into this and make them, let's really shine a light on John, but also let's let this resonate in a deeper way where the audience will think about themselves as well.
Yeah, it's supposed to do with my best friend. I was always an oddball, but now I was an oddball without another oddball. I became super critical of everything. Suddenly, the life that has seemed so abundant when I was young looked like problem after problem after problem. And the biggest problem I found was me. I attempted to take my own life. But during the process, I realized I had a deep desire to live.
Chris, will you pause it?
And I called for
So, I mean, obviously, there's a whole story there, bro. There's a whole story there, but just by giving the audience that little glimpse, I attempted to take my own life. I think that's enough. Sometimes in personal revelation, less is more.
Yeah. And I think so many people understand what that is, what that feeling is. And especially at that age, especially at those awkward ages. And seeing those pictures of you, seeing those pictures of kind of the hopeless, Jason, it's both so sad and touching, because you just want to reach out and hug that kid. You understand that kid so much, seeing him, and you just want him to know how much she's loved, and it just added that much point. So it's telling a lot in a very concise, controlled way.
help. Never be ashamed to ask for help. It can save your life. Back to 12 years ago, one day I was minding my own business, and my aunt and uncle said, "Jason, you should try yoga. We think it would help you." What? And I was polite, and when you want to be polite about an idea but have no intention of doing it, and I was like, yeah, sure, yoga, yeah, sure. But in the back of my mind, I was like, no way. Yoga, no. I have a disability. I don't do yoga.
So that one, just to interject, is we just came out of this very kind of heavy, part of the story, and we needed something to kind of lighten it. So this was one of those that in the script was just my aunt and uncle recommended I try yoga, and I was like, no way, I have a disability. But when we were filming, it was like, let's have some fun with this. Let's elaborate on it, and you got more animated, and it kind of just added a nice lightness, a change of pace, if you will, to the video at this point in it, to then transition into where we're going.
And also I ran into this a lot when I was a beginning speaker. I would tell the tough parts of my story, but then not leave enough time to really express the change, express the hope, express the transformation, and so that's something also to keep in mind when telling your own story and bridging to the audience. If there's been transformation since the tough things, transformational positive things since the tough thing you're talking about, always add that into the story. It is very important. It's very important for the listener to know that there's a way beyond. Of course, if you're still in the middle of the confusion and still trying to solve the problem, be authentic about that too, because sometimes people are in the middle of something and don't know the answer yet, and that's very relatable too. But if you have experienced change beyond the problem, yeah, it's important to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially too, to quickly elaborate before jumping back into it. So yeah, I would imagine speaking on stage and telling the story, there's parts of it that it feels like, okay, I've gone over this, or I've explained this part. And so that was something that making this gave us the opportunity to do too, because I was sitting there as being like, well, wait a minute, I'd like to know a little bit more about this. I'm not sure I totally understand this segue. And so it was really fun to have you be able to, be playful and open to exploring. And I think ultimately, like you said, it doesn't skip over something important that happens. It kind of celebrates it in a way.
It's definitely a trick to keep a story fresh if we've been telling it a long time, but when you're telling a story you've told often, remember it for the listener, it's might be the first time hearing it. It may transform their lives. So try, even though you know what has happened, you've lived it. Try coming at it with a fresh curiosity and a fresh sense of wonder and a fresh sense of importance. It's challenging, but it's really important for the listener.
That's an excellent point.
6 months later, one morning, I was pacing around my apartment and thinking, oh gosh, it should be one of the happiest days of my life. After all, I have a great job. I'm surrounded by friends and family, and I just graduated with a master's degree. But then I was like, hey, I'm miserable. In fact, I'm miserably stressed out, and I just don't like my voice and coordination. I don't accept, let alone love me. So I reconsidered my aunt and uncle's suggestion. I went down to the YMCA and signed up for a $35 monthly membership with the intention of doing yoga. I didn't even take a yoga class that day, but that small step, that micro step, changed the course of my life.
Sorry, I don't mean to. This is a good part of the video. I don't mean to stilt it, but I think that's such an important point too. Is we could get lost in. You could argue, I didn't need to know all the details about going to the yoga class and not even taking the yoga class that day, just signing up. But to me, that's such an important detail, because to have massive change in our life, or to do something that gets the ball rolling, it doesn't mean you have to always execute at the highest level. You didn't have to go and take a yoga class your very first time you stepped
Chris?
into the YMCA.
Are you here, Chris?
Oh, here I am. Yeah. There's
Okay.
a weird little connection issue, but we're back.
Cool.
Do you want me to resume, or did you want to?
Yeah, please. Countless yoga classes and micro steps later, I found myself on the path to a new, albeit ironic, dream when I'm being a professional speaker. In seventh grade, I barely wanted to speak, and now I'm speaking to a couple people. Listen, what I've discovered is we all have circumstances. Mine started with a birth injury. Yours may be something totally different. What I do know is this: our circumstances, as difficult as they sometimes are, don't have to define us. Take your next micro step. It could be the one that changes everything. Now I imagine some of you are thinking, easy for you to say, Jason. Well, actually, no, it's not. I have a speech impediment. You are the best hope for your goals and dreams. I think somehow the interface of playing the video through StreamYard slowed down the video a little bit, so it's funny because I already speak more slowly than a typical person, and then that video is slower yet. So you really get to hang on every word as you watch that video.
Yeah, I mean, on my end, it came across pretty normal. So I think that's probably the thing of being on a streaming platform, right? It's all going to be dependent on the connection. And that was weird too, because we lost something in there. It seemed to drop the signal and then pick it back up. So that's what's crazy, is you and I could be watching the same thing in unison. You might be experiencing it different than I am.
And this is something to remember about being a professional and being professionally authentic. I mean, we can show up and do our best, but there's still going to be imperfections of one sort or another, and that doesn't mean that we're not intentional. It doesn't mean we're not professional. It doesn't mean that we're not going to learn from what didn't go the way we wanted to. It just means that we're human and that we have the ability to do our imperfect best in any situation, whether it's a very personal conversation or whether it's a very professional conversation.
Yep. That is very true. And I think too, you talk about that's another area where you talk about being authentic, professionally authentic. And I think that's another area where you get to let people in, people want to see like, oh, okay, I couldn't stand up on stage. I couldn't speak to people. I couldn't do this. Or I couldn't do that. Sometimes not doing something perfectly, making that mistake, as long as you don't let it fluster you and break break your concentration to the point where you tear everything down, as long as you use it as an opportunity to connect deeper and stay in it, I think that's the audience needs that too, because they can then relate that much more and see themselves in your shoes.
And speaking of authenticity and professionalism, people do not need perfect professionals, but they do want authentic professionals. As a professional, when we make mistakes, it's best to be proactive and say, hey, this is what happened. This is how I'm going to rectify it. Let's move forward.
Yeah, that is very true, and that's also speaks to developing trust with people too. People want to work with who they can trust. People want to listen to who they can trust. And there's so many people, as we know, especially in the speaking realm, that create a lot of distrust in people. And so I think that definitely speaks to the authenticity of the moment and creating trust in people.
Well said. We could talk on and on about this movie and the whole Imperfect Best Awkwardly Awesome universe, because it's what we're creating, and we get so excited about it. But we should wrap it up. What are the final words, Taylor?
Peace. Just kidding. No, I think exactly what you said is important. We jump on this thing, and we have a somewhat of an idea, but this is a conversation. This is us talking about stuff, and we could go down any avenue we want, and we could really nitpick or really pick apart something and talk for hours, like you said. It's easy, but I think the key point to remember in this is just a conversation that we're having and we're exploring, and take the key details that you will out of it and apply anything that resonates with you, anything that makes sense.
Very, very well said. And speaking of Imperfect Best, I don't always remember the outro, but today I'm going to remember the outro. But before that, thank you so much, my business partner and friend, for being on this amazing journey with me. It means the world to me and so many people.
Well, thank you, brother, and thank you for bringing me along on the journey and for constantly inspiring me and giving me new things to work with and fresh perspectives on life and everything else. Much appreciated.
And here is the outro. Smile. Remember to smile.